Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories.
You live in sexual anarchy.
This is the Troll Patrol, live with Justin Freakin.
Welcome to the Troll Patrol Live. It's a freaking election day. And oh, I'm sorry, I didn't tell anybody I was going to come on at 7 o'clock, but that was my plan. Because I believe the polls just closed in Indiana and are getting ready to close in Ohio in about 30 minutes. Tomorrow night, we're also going to come on at 7 o'clock. Tomorrow night, it is a debate doubleheader. Up first is the Los Angeles mayor's debate. That is Karen Bass and Spencer Pratt. And the LA mayor's... I think my camera's crooked. Sorry, it's kind of... There we go. Am I straight now? I mean, I'm not straight. Come on. This is Karen Bass and Spencer Pratt in the LA mayor's race. And then after that, we get the California primary gubernatorial race. But it's a jungle primary. So there are Republicans and Democrats in the primary. So LA mayor's debate... California gubernatorial debate doubleheader tomorrow night. That should be a fun time. So we're going to come on at 7 for that. We've got several elections we're going to look at tonight. Indiana and Ohio are at the top of the list. The Ohio gubernatorial race. There's a primary for the Senate seat. Sherrod Brown has a challenger, but I don't think that one's going to be a close race. But we're gonna check in with that. We're gonna all kinds of congressional repercussions in Indiana. Carla, Denonymously, Holiday, Fuzzy Simba, DeJones. Welcome in, friends. Good evening. Good evening to the YouTube. Good evening to Rumble. We've been broadcasting on Rumble. Welcome in, Kick. CJ, my friend, good to see you. Broadcasting on Kick, Rumble, YouTube, and Twitch, of course. Fly one up, tip one back. Oh yeah, this slider's going out on me. It was going on. We were smoking a bong out there. And my lighter was going dead on me. Oh, shit. But I also think it went through the washing machine, so maybe I need to check it. Maybe it's got fuzz in it. It feels light, though. No, I don't have any fuzz in it. I think it's going dead. Light one up, tip one back. We got all kinds of news we need to get to. Attempted bridge takeover. Wild video of a driver trying to hit a kid riding a bike. Fuzzy Simba, did you mention you might get a snow day if you are in the Midwest? Wyoming getting slammed with snow. Colorado apparently getting it overnight tonight or tomorrow. The World Central Kitchen has called the Lebanese ceasefire a joke. Federal judge apologized to the White House Correspondents' Dinner possible shooter. He might not have fired his gun, but maybe he did. We don't exactly know yet. We've still got questions. Tanner Horner, the FedEx driver who was delivering a package to a 8-year-old girl, abducted her and killed her, getting the death penalty. Got the verdict for you in the Stephen Diggs trial. He was accused of assaulting his private chef. The search is on for a missing NKU student. I didn't want to talk about this yesterday because I was already bummed out enough. I skipped over it. It's an urgent search for a young trans girl missing from Northern Kentucky University. Homeless encampment fire. You know we're talking about California. And snow in May, all that and a lot freaking more tonight on the Troll Patrol. New Swalwell allegations. New Swalwell allegations tonight. Serotonin Crunch, welcome in. The news is dark every day. Yeah, measles cases are up. We got the hantavirus is spreading through cruise ships. Anything else I can regale you with tonight? But we've got elections. Oh. It is just another day. How many of you knew that a mass shooting occurred in the United States today? Hell, I do the news for a living, and it was kind of one of the last stories I stumbled across. You just assume. Fair enough. One of the, it's amazing I even came across it to show it to you guys tonight. 2 dead, 3 injured at a Dallas suburb. Shooting earlier today.
2 people dead, 3 others injured after a shooting at a suburban Dallas shopping plaza. Police say officers responded this afternoon to a busy plaza known for Korean businesses, where they found 5 people shot, 2 victims pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators say a 69-year-old suspect was arrested.
Don't jump to conclusions, because I believe the man that did the shooting was also Korean. 69-year-old suspect. This is like a disgruntled, personal beef for a former worker or something.
Dead, 3 others injured after a shooting at a suburban Dallas shopping plaza. Police say officers responded this afternoon to a busy plaza known for Korean businesses, where they found 5 people shot, 2 victims pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators say a 69-year-old suspect was arrested after a short chase. Authorities say the suspect and victims were meeting before that shooting happened.
Yeah, the name was Korean. See if there's more details in the story. Sung Han Ho. He was arrested about 4 miles away at a grocery store. It was not immediately known if he had a lawyer who could speak on his behalf. Police were at a nearby apartment complex where Ho was listed as having recently lived. Neighbors said they did not recognize the name. 69-year-old Ho. A 69-year-old Ho. A 69-year-old Ho. I mean, you have to laugh at it, right? Oh my God, it's Crix's mom. My chat is so nice. Libertad, welcome in. It's an elderly garden tool. Shortly after the shooting, officers with their guns drawn walked past doors at K-Town Plaza in an area of Carrollton known as Koreatown. Agents from the FBI and another federal agency were among law enforcement at the scene. Carrollton, a population of 130,000, is 20 miles north of Dallas. I mean, that's basically Dallas, right? More than 4,000 residents are of Korean descent. The city is home to multiple Korean churches from Baptist to Presbyterian. 69-year-old suspect, Sung Han Ho. I've never said I was woke. Well,
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Well, I guess my tagline is let's toke and get woke. But I'm saying it ironically. I'm not. I'm sorry. Here's fun. This should be fun. Well, I don't know. I'm going to put it up here, and it's going to be like, the lava is ravaging multiple villages around the volcano. Volcano is erupting in Kahlua. I thought was a beverage. Kahlua, Hawaii. Panelists, welcome in. Libertad over on YouTube talking shit on you Twitch people. I love it. Kalawi? Kalawi? Someone ate too much Taco Bell. Socialist not welcome in. Apparently Chipotle is going under. It is not the brand that it used to be, but this is live in Kalawi, Hawaii. You've never been to a Chipotle? I've only been like twice. If it makes you feel better. Cricks, welcome in. I don't, I guess I had it when it was still, good, because like it used to be they had like really quality ingredients and they gave you like really big portions. They don't do that anymore. They've downsized. Actually, for some reason, I like business YouTubes on like why businesses fail and shit. I watched one about Chipotle not that long ago, and they were trying to seem really high class, so they bought up a lot of expensive real estate during the market crash of 2008, the Great Recession. And when the rents went back up, it really fucked them over, so they had to start raising prices and cutting costs, and it's caused them to take a real brand hit. And that also happened around the time that they had an E. coli outbreak. There was an E. coli out in 2013, 2014, something, or maybe it was salmonella. It was something like that. It was one or the other. I want to say it was E. coli. My favorite year? I mean, I don't have a favorite year, I don't think. Watson, welcome in, friend. It was E. coli, thank you. Was it E. coli on like lettuce or something like? It's usually things that are not cooked. Byrotic, welcome in, and that's why it affects like Taco Bell. Quiznos just like, see, I don't know if it's bad food or like I couldn't tell you if Chipotle was good. I wasn't impressed by it. Well, I think like there was an E. coli outbreak at a Taco Bell one time, and they blamed it on green onions. But they think now that it was actually the cheese. Because like all the cheese came from the same supplier, whereas the green onions in the stores that had the outbreaks came from multiple different suppliers. Oh, you think they died because of the we love the subs? I loved those commercials. If anything, they made me eat at Quiznos more. With the little rat, but apparently they were like a negative reason. Once again, I've watched like a business. There's a company guy, I think, on YouTube. He has some really good videos. I don't know if it was him specifically. I thought they were great commercials. This is live right now. This is a new eruption, I guess. I'm just assuming it's on some island far away from everything, but for all I know, like, there are children burning. I don't know. I don't know any better. Holiday says it's in his bedroom. It's pretty. It does kind of look like a butthole, like somebody is... God's gonna put a fire in the butthole. I mean, I guess technically it is kind of like Earth's butthole, right? The camera is actually mounted on his school. More like a okay, fair enough. It's more like a zit. The volcano is more like a zit on the face of the earth. Oh yeah, we got elections going on. I'm sorry. It's election day. I'm just over here like, let's watch this volcano erupt. Then again, the numbers keep going up. Apparently people like this content. I guess this is not the show that you want to put on while you're eating. There's gonna be some crude jokes. Flow is not high enough for this shit. It is a nice volcano. Well, I mean, what's your idea of a nice volcano? It's not exactly in the shape of a volcano as we normally know a volcano. It looks more like a geyser. But I guess not all volcanoes are like giant mountains that come to a perfect circle at the top. And because I'm from Eastern Kentucky, this looks like a goddamn strip mine, and there's a geyser in the middle of it. It is Kilauea Volcano, Kilauea, Hawaii. I'm probably not saying that correct. If you pull down your pants and something like this is going on, you need to see a doctor. They got an ointment. You might need to get a penicillin shot. Kill Whitey. Oh my God. Got me. Was Warlord here for that? He wasn't, was he? Fucking, he would love that shit. Chris J. DJ Dub, welcome in, friends. I'm glad. Am I still up everywhere? I didn't realize what I was saying. That is probably TOS. I got pretty good. You probably can't say that. So anyway, it's election day. We've got elections all over the country, but primarily the ones we're focused on that have national implications is Indiana and Ohio. Let's start off in Indiana. It's also, I think there's something in Michigan that also may have national implications.
It is primary day. It is Tuesday. The focus is on the Midwest this time, and voters in Indiana and Ohio headed to the polls. Most eyes, though, will be on the Hoosier state. President Trump is seeking to unseat GOP state senators who rebuffed a White House campaign to redraw the state's congressional maps. Joining us now is Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty. And Raph, I need to point out it is also Cinco de Mayo and Taco Tuesday, but that's a story for another day. What could we learn, though, about the president's hold on the Republican Party?
Yeah, perhaps that's a bigger deal to Americans outside.
Oh yeah, it is
the
Cinco.
States, but for us, at least, specifically Indiana, as you just mentioned, is fascinating. In fact, just to give you an idea of how invested the president is, he just put on Truth Social just a few moments ago, good luck to the great Indiana Senate candidates who are running against people who, and again, this is the president's words, couldn't care less about our country. You remember, Del, it was in December of last year. Indiana was at the center of a political firestorm. They were hearing from the White House, from the president himself. J.D. Vance even went out to Indianapolis, all with the goal of having them redistrict.
I want to say Vance is there right now, or was giving a speech just like an hour or two ago.
Republicans create.
Why wouldn't you be allowed to celebrate Cinco? Go to a Mexican restaurant. Fuck it.
For the GOP. Ultimately, though, the difference.
I should say fuck it on this show and just ask Curious if she wants to go to a Mexican restaurant.
Tonight, you have about 7 candidates specifically who voted
Curious,
against.
You want to go to a Mexican restaurant? I'll say fuck it. It's Cinco.
A candidate, or then a state senator who voted against this. And the president.
I'll say fuck this shit. I'll go to a Mexican
apparatus
restaurant.
Has gotten involved in big ways. Tens of millions of dollars being spent by
and
Donald
it's Taco
Trump
Tuesday
and his
too.
Allies again in a state House race for a GOP
You got a burrito
primary.
to serve me holiday? Is that what you're saying?
Overtake Democrats. It's a primary we're talking about here. And it is probably the clearest test.
Fuck, DJ Dub's been on a hell of a run at a concert.
About the president's hold and influence on his own party.
Fascinating now that we are talking about state house races, but is the biggest enemy of all of this redistricting going to be the clock? I mean, the clock is ticking on the effort to redraw all of these maps.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we were talking so much in the earlier part of this year about the partisan redistricting, and then the ball game changed quite a bit with the Supreme Court's decision just last week. There are now, we know of 3 states that are at least trying to redistrict based on that ruling out of the conservative majority of the Supreme Court that undercut Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Louisiana, which was at the center of that case, we know that they almost certainly will lose that one Democratic seat that was at the heart of that case. Alabama is now in a special session. The governor there, Kay Ivey, is calling lawmakers back to try to do something. They have some additional hurdles they need the Supreme Court to ultimately rule on and sign off on any new maps, but they could potentially eliminate up to 2 Democratic seats. And then, as you and I are speaking right now, Del, Tennessee
I was serious
is
about going to
also
Mexican restaurant.
doing the same thing. They only have one Democratic
She
lawmaker.
might be cooking something
but of course,
in there.
when
I
the
don't know.
margins are as tight as they are here in Washington, all of those seats matter. And we're talking about a number of other states we know are going to be looking towards 2028 and beyond for redistricting because, as you mentioned, how tight the timeline is. South Carolina, Georgia, the two other big southern states that most certainly will try to do something in elections to come.
Yeah, fascinating. That seat in Tennessee is Memphis.
Yeah.
But it's held by a non-African American. So you can't look at this and say that this is racial gerrymandering because it's not in that particular state. But they're saying why.
Yeah, Steve Cohen, he is...
No, she's in the shower. That's why she didn't hear me.
He left in Tennessee, and I
Hey,
know...
Glue, I was getting ready to say,
Secretary
like,
of
fuck
State
it, it's
coming up,
Cinco.
who I
I'll
think is
just
gonna
go to a
have
Mexican
some more
restaurant. I'm curious who wants
pointed
to go to a
language
Mexican
about his
restaurant.
reaction to that ruling, but no doubt we are in a time when there
say,
is a
fuck
ton
this
of
shit.
confusion for voters and even election officials who are trying to get everything set for the primaries and then, of course, November.
Did we learn something about Indiana with that? That was the goal of that piece. I have no idea. I was thinking about a Mexican restaurant that I'm probably not going to get to go to. Shit, I was thinking about fucking beans and guac in the middle of the night the other night. Hey, Igloo, welcome in, friend. Did I tell you good evening? I was thinking about a Mexican restaurant I'm not going to get to go to. Lords of Acid, they do that song, Let Me See Your Pussy, Show It to Me, right? I'm thinking of the right band. I want to see your pussy, show it to me. Correct? I'm like, that's okay. That's the band. Okay, cool. Of course I would know that song. Is that their hit single? I'm sorry. I mean, if a band does a song called Let Me See Your Pussy, I'm probably going to know it. I'm into it. Anyway, the rundown. I'm sorry. The rundown of the Ohio races. We're looking at the gubernatorial races, the Senate race.
Today is election day here in Ohio. Voters will be heading to the polls to weigh in on several races, including some major statewide races.
Today is the primary for the governor and U.S. Senate race. Candace Harris live at a polling location in Cleveland with what you need to know this morning. Good morning, Candace.
Good morning, Danita and Dave. Yes, so polls open at 6:30 this morning,
Candace.
a little bit less than an hour and a half from now for people to go inside and to cast their votes in a primary election that's set to have a lot of eyeballs on it, not only here in Ohio, but in fact across the country. We want to take you through some of those statewide races, and we will start right at the top of the ticket for Ohio governor. On the Republican side, voters are choosing between Vivek Ramaswamy and Casey Punch. Ramaswamy has been endorsed by President Donald Trump and the Ohio Republican Party.
DeJones, Punch has been coming on strong, hasn't he? Vivek was up in the polling, but is might be facing a putsch that has a tailwind.
The winner will face Democrat Amy Acton, who's running unopposed, as well as Libertarian candidate Don Kissick in the general election in November.
Of course.
Meanwhile, in the U.S. Senate race, familiar names are showing up once again. Democrat Sherrod Brown faces challenger Ron Kincaid, while Republican John Husted, who was appointed to the seat previously won by Vice President J.D. Vance, is also on the ballot on the Republican side. And there are also other key statewide races, including Attorney General, State Treasurer, and Secretary of State. So a lot going on today. And if you're not able to get out this morning to vote, that's okay. Polls will be open until 7:30 this evening. And as long as you're in line before
So that's
the polls
right
close,
now.
you are able to vote.
Polls closing in Ohio.
Candace here reporting live for us this morning. Thank you so much. We're going to
So you got the rundown of what is going on, what to watch in Indiana and Ohio. Let's go to the Kornacki cam. This is Steve Kornacki. It is his feed alone, and we'll see him cut in whenever he goes live on NBC or MSNBC and does like a hit, and may even pop in on local stations. But he'll mainly be talking to us, the internet audience. So I really enjoy
Walker's been getting bad news
his
lately.
coverage.
Good's been getting nothing but good news all night. Nothing in the 23rd. I don't know why.
We just got another update in Howard in 21.
Yep.
700 new votes. Powell wins this batch. 71% of.
Buck is getting clobbered. There. Buck's just getting clobbered. That's what we could say. And the 19th district, Holdman got clobbered. And up here, I don't want to forget it, Linda Rogers.
We don't have time for kamikaze dolphins right now.
The picture is still fuzzy, but that's vote from her part of the district. That's the key, I think, to what you're seeing right there. We have 30 seconds to the hit. So again, these I'm just showing you. We got nothing here in the first district yet. I'll probably stop talking here, but I'll show you these numbers as we get ready to do this hit. Just take you through them. 20 seconds, they're telling me. You see the numbers?
So we got about 30% of the vote in most of the Indiana races.
Enjoy the hit, and then we'll come right back here.
So yeah, he's going to be on the MSNBC or NBC right now. I don't know which channel he's going to be on. That's what he means by hit.
We're back now with an election update. Polls have just closed.
He's on the main NBC channel.
Indiana and Ohio, two states.
This is Tom Lama.
Litmus test for President Trump's power.
Shut up, Tom Lama.
And of course, if it's election night, Steve Kornacki is locked into the big board. Steve, let's start with Indiana, where President Trump has been leading an effort to oust a group of state senators. Walk us through that race and the votes coming in so far.
Yeah, Tom, already the Trump side has landed a very significant blow in this Indiana primary. I'll show it to you right here. This is Travis Holdman. This is a member of the state Senate Republican leadership in Indiana. He voted against that Trump-backed bid to change the congressional map to give the Republicans more seats. As a result, Trump targeted him in this primary, and NBC News has already projected that Travis Holdman has been defeated in the Republican primary by his Trump-backed challenger. So already a blow there that the Trump side has landed, and they may be on the verge of another. Here, just from the city of Kokomo down to the Indianapolis suburbs in this district, a long-serving Republican incumbent is currently really getting blown out in his primary. NBC News has not projected this race, but it's a steep hill to climb for Jim Buck, another Republican incumbent who voted against the Trump-backed redistricting plan. And then down here in the 41st district, we got about half the vote in. It's a very close race here. But again, Greg Walker, the Republican incumbent here, voting against that Trump-backed plan. He is definitely in some trouble in this district at this hour. There is one incumbent who voted against the plan, who does seem to be in good shape so far. I'll show you that. His name is Good, Greg Good, over here around town.
He's in good shape.
About a third of the vote is in. This is the only one right now, the only Republican state senator to oppose Trump, who right now at least is getting encouraging numbers in these primaries.
And then talk to our viewers about what you're watching in Ohio tonight.
Yeah, so next door in Ohio, where the polls are just closing, we've got the Senate race this November that's going to be closely watched nationally here. And on the Democratic side here tonight, Sherrod Brown, we expect certainly to be nominated again. He's run before. He was defeated. He's trying to get back to the Senate against John Husted. But I think what's most interesting to come out of Ohio tonight is we're looking at primaries, Republican primaries.
So Husted appointed to the seat J.D. Vance held.
Against Marcy Kaptur. Marcy Kaptur is the longest-serving female member of Congress in history, a Democrat first elected in 1982. Her district was changed by redistricting. It would have voted for Trump by 11 points. She's facing an uphill climb. She finds out who her opponent is tonight. That's a primary we're going to be keeping a close eye on as those numbers start to come in, Tom.
All right. Steve Kornacki, great to have you. Thank you, man. Now to the major reversal in President.
All right, folks. I
didn't even mention Vivek.
We're back in here. Now I got to figure out how to get these races back.
Sparks.
Okay, good. We're back. That was easier than I thought. Adam, anything come in there?
Yeah, back in 21, Howard County.
Winning her primary.
Got another 500 votes.
Yep.
Powell wins 66% of the new votes in Howard.
Yeah, story continues to be the same. I could say it again. You could probably say it back to me at this point. You know the story. Tracy Powell is doing fantastic tonight here, and Jim Buck isn't. Look at this. I mean, the margin here is actually bigger.
It doesn't sound like the Democrats at all.
We got some new vote in 11 back in St. Joseph.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. What do we got here?
1,000 votes. Schmutzler, 597.
Schmutzler?
Rogers, 417.
Same day. It's 5-9. Can you do the percentages on this? I mean, I see it was dead even.
I mean, there's not really.
That's like
What we're watching is infighting with Republicans mainly tonight. There's not really anything for us to root for.
I mean, look, add Rogers to the list, folks. Add Rogers to the list of incumbents who are not getting good news so far out of election night. This is her base, St. Joseph County. These are the suburbs of South Bend. This is Granger. She's now trailing in that portion of the district with most of the vote we think counted. Just over 50% of the vote is counted. Her Trump-backed challenger, Brian Schmutzler, is 8 points ahead of her here.
Schmutzler.
And is pulling away so far with the same-day vote. Remember, the early vote was basically dead even here. It was a slight advantage for Schmutzler. Big batch of election day vote, people who just went out and voted today. That was what was just counted and reported out. And Schmutzler's winning that in a landslide. He's winning that batch by 20 points, opening up nearly, as we say, nearly a 10-point lead in Linda Rogers' backyard. So that is, if you're Rogers, that's a very, very discouraging update that you just got. And again, I'll show you this. This is where it stands with half the vote in. About half the vote's going to come out of here, and about half the vote's going to come out of here. So, right, we're talking about half the vote from half the district. And it's supposed to be the pro-Rogers part of the district. And she's losing it by nearly 10 points, okay? Again, remember, this is what this part of the district looked like in the presidential election. Trump won it, but he barely won it. A lot of Democrats, a lot of opposition to Trump. Go across the border to Elkhart County, the other half of the district, totally different story. There you got a lot more of a pro-Trump electorate, okay? So this is the area where if you're Rogers, if you wanted Democrats coming in and voting to give you an advantage here, this is where you're going to get it. You weren't going to get it over here. You were going to get it here. Not to mention, as I say, this is where she's from. She lives in Granger, and she's down significantly with a lot of the vote in right there. So we're really only looking right now, and it's still nothing from the 23rd district, but boy, if you are Spencer Deary, you have got to be getting real nervous right now.
Oh, Deary.
No votes reported in your race. But
we
you
got
have
some
seen
new vote in 38.
Yeah.
And in 41.
Of course, welcome in, Fred.
Just, I think, continues to be very good for good, right?
That's right.
Nothing
good
changed.
for good.
Tell me 41. This is much more. Oh, I can already see it was good for Davis. Where was it from?
It's another 200 batch in Bartholomew.
Yeah, and she won it what? What'd she win it by?
73-27.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, if the picture gets clearer by the update here. Remember that first same-day vote update for Walker out of Bartholomew County? We would say, well, it's not going in the right direction if you're him. We've had 2 or 3 subsequent updates, and they're getting closer to that catastrophic range for him. District-wide here. Again.
So these are Republicans that oppose Trump's redistricting plan. They're getting
now. Look at it this way.
Primaried by Trump-backed candidates
in Bartholomew County. Walker's political
and it looks like Trump has a hell of a sway in Indiana.
Every update that we've been getting since the early vote started coming in, his lead right now is under 5 points in his political base in this district. Meanwhile, north side of that border, Johnson County, only 42% of the vote is in here. And this is Davis's political base. And look at that advantage she got in the early vote. And we're seeing her do so well with the same-day vote down here in Bartholomew. Is there really any reason to think the story's going to be much different in Johnson County when we start getting that early vote? Honestly, if you're Walker, it better be. I don't know what else to say if you're Walker. So this is what it looks like. Half the vote in the 41st district. Davis is leading by more than 5 points, and more of the vote is coming in from Walker's part of the district. Boy, you got to be feeling good if you're Davis. So, honestly, we've got Republican incumbents who are feeling. We got one who's been.
I got Mr. Socks right here next to me.
It's hard to see here. We got one who's
He
getting
just took a
really
trip
bad news
outside.
right there in the 11th district, and we got one I'm just taking you through right here. That's
You wanna
four.
say hi to everybody
That's
now that you got
either
back from being
defeated
outside?
or facing some very, very difficult math already. We do have one right here, Good, who's been the outlier tonight. He's been having a good night. He's been having a great night. I should just say great. So it's 4 right now that the Trump side, to some degree, is very enthusiastic about. It's 1 that the incumbent side is very enthusiastic about. But like I said, that's the backdrop for saying still nothing in the 23rd district. If you're Deary and this is the story you're seeing tonight around the state, how are you feeling right now? How are you feeling as you anticipate the first votes coming in from this part of the district? And again, nothing, although what time is it? 7? Well, we're getting upward of 8 o'clock here. So 8 o'clock is when we got numbers from Lake County. I'll zoom in here. We're 20 minutes away, so we might actually, we might be in range of getting something now finally. We could start to pay more attention here to the first district. Dan Durnell.
So he was named Socks when I got him, and I didn't feel like I could change his name, but it's not my kind of a name. So he's Socrates, and then Socks for short.
This is what it looked like in the 2024 presidential election. So again, of all the districts,
I had to change all my cats' names slightly, make them
districts, counties, parts of counties, but as a whole, this is the least.
Make them fit me, right? So Smokey, that's such a generic name, right? So his name is actually Smokey Bong.
He only
He's
won it
Mr.
by
Bong.
7 if you rolled back the clock to 2020.
Now that's totally me.
Okay, so again, and we're talking essentially the Chicago suburbs here. Okay, I mean, how close to Chicago? You go a couple miles north. They're trying to build the Chicago Bears stadium there.
Maynard was just Maynard. I added James Kitten.
That's the part of Indiana we're talking about right here.
He's Maynard James Kitten.
In theory, because of how politically competitive it is, remember what we were saying at the start of the night? We were asking the question of, hey, Democrats, they can vote. Are they going to turn out? And are they going to vote because they've been so enthusiastic to do it elsewhere? Are they going to be a presence here?
Yeah, they do.
So far, the places where we would be seeing that, if that was the story tonight, so far we're not seeing it. We're not seeing it in Hamilton County, and we're not seeing it so far up in St. Joseph County, near South Bend. But this is one of those districts where, again, if you were Durnell, were you thinking that might be part of your path to survival tonight? Adam, can you check on the 13th district? This is the other question that I think is now very.
Yeah, well, just for your background, the state report
too hard to spell.
Quite slow tonight, so we're not getting a significant amount of updates strictly from there. So nothing yet from the state website.
Okay.
So we're not getting anything from Ohio yet.
I don't have the graphic to show you. Let me zoom back. And nothing else has come in, right?
Nothing yet.
This is becoming. There's no vote here. So it's blank, and you're not missing anything. This is becoming a really interesting question. Senate District 13. Let me just see if I have some numbers here.
It's actually that one's 6.
6. Yes. Okay. How prepared is Steve? 6th Senate District here. This one's becoming interesting because
I say that we step away, do a little bit of news, come back to Karnacki here in a moment.
Okay. Rick
Once we start getting some results in from Ohio. Docs, please leave me alone. We can always go back to the Hawaiian. I can't talk tonight. That's kind of bad for somebody who talks for a living. The Kilauea volcano, Kilauea, Hawaii, possibly, if I'm saying that right. It's a pretty butthole. I feel like it's spurting a little higher now that we've turned it on. It's getting higher. Did it just for us. Putting on a show. It's mesmerizing. I could sit here and watch this for a while. Iran has been doing some major damage against allied forces like a UAE oil field. Meanwhile, the World Central Kitchen chef going on NBC News to call the ceasefire with Lebanon a complete joke.
Fighting is intensifying between the Israeli military and Iran's proxy group Hezbollah in Lebanon, despite a ceasefire. The IDF issuing new evacuation orders for several towns and villages this week in southern Lebanon amid a recent barrage of strikes. It comes as a humanitarian group is issuing a new warning about a deepening crisis in Lebanon as people continue to be forced from their homes by the conflict. A new report from the United Nations and Lebanon's Ministry of Agriculture says more than 1.2 million people in Lebanon could face acute hunger between now and August, which is about a quarter of the people living in the country. Joining me now is World Central Kitchen chef Aline Kamakian in Beirut. Aline, thank you so much for making time to speak with us today. And you were on this show just a few weeks ago telling us about your work trying to feed families in Lebanon. Since then, this report has come out warning of a food crisis. How concerning is this assessment to you?
I know this woman.
Well, it's...
She used to drive buses into people's bloodstream and shit.
The amount of the people that are in the state of acute food insecurity is huge. Recent reports speak about 24% of the population. This is one out of four, and it's around 1,240,000 people that are without food.
Carrot Top really let himself go.
43% of the population, of the Lebanese population, are in need of humanitarian.
That's not true. That woman is so much better looking than Carrot Top. He's had a shit ton of surgery.
He's doing an enormous job.
Looks like a goddamn alien.
And distributing more than 25,000 meals per day. But again, the need is going much faster. Now the internally displaced people has risen up to 1.3 million. People, and only few thousand, 100,000 of them are in shelters, primitive shelters. So things are getting every day worsen. You have daily, still from 50 to 70 airstrike. You have new warnings, new areas that is being evacuated. Nothing is stopping them. Nothing is stopping the war of continuing, and people are getting more and more desperate.
Such difficult conditions. Can you tell me more about what you have seen there on the ground? Are you noticing shortages of food, and has it been harder to access the ingredients you would need to make a basic meal?
It is getting, still we can access, but it's getting much more expensive. It's getting really expensive. You have the international inflation that is affecting, and you have the Lebanese war that is affecting. So you have prices has risen up very fast. And what is the situation is that people cannot afford anymore, whether they are affected from the war or from poverty. You have both that is it's creating a huge crisis.
And the UN report did talk about displacement, which you also mentioned, of people as one of the factors that's obviously contributing to this crisis, but it also mentions the conflict, which is disrupting farming and supply chains. So how much of an impact is that having?
You have to know that 65% of the agricultural land in Lebanon are located in the south and the Bekaa.
I heard it was 67 2/3%.
Are heavily bombarded right now, and white phosphorus and whatever you want. So
chance of winning, and then add 66 2/3%. I got 141 2/3 chance of winning.
But I'm bad at math.
You don't have an agriculture right now.
I'm just not in the right mindset for this tonight. I can't do serious news.
Most of the farmers became internally displaced people. So the agriculture is very weak. You have also the infrastructure. So there is no irrigation, there is no water. So you have this also that is affecting. So Lebanon is depending most of it, 80 to 90% on importation. So this is what makes everything much more difficult and much more heavy to continue. You have more than 49,000 olive trees that are deliberately derooted, and so you have all the trees and everything that is being burned. So this is also affecting a lot. In the south,
Oh yeah,
only,
they've had massive wildfires.
The farmers that they cannot arrive to their lands.
And officially, there is a ceasefire in place for now between Israel and Hezbollah. But as we've mentioned and noted, the fighting does
made her
continue.
laugh.
So has the ceasefire helped to alleviate the humanitarian situation at all, in your view, these last few weeks?
Well, the ceasefire is a complete joke. Okay, so I don't know how to explain, but the ceasefire made things worse, I guess, because people thought that they can go back to their, try to find their houses, try to find their homes, but unfortunately it's a complete farce. So the ceasefire, people started to go back to the south, trying to find their houses, whatever left of it. Unfortunately, the bombardment restarted, so we as humanitarian, we were like, a bit, it's very difficult to arrive every place to distribute food because of the road, because of the people that are on the road, and the war that the roads got bombarded. You cannot arrive every place. So the ceasefire, I'm sorry, but it's a complete farce. No.
Aline, and in the short time that we have left, what do you make of the response from the international community? And do you think enough is being done to help Lebanon right now?
Well, there's World Central Kitchen is here. There's a lot of NGO that working, but unfortunately, the need is so big that all of us together, we're not able to cover it. It's a huge, the need is huge. International community is acting as if there is no war, but here on the ground, there is a huge, we're getting hit every day. So the need is huge. I don't know if we continue like this, it's a catastrophe.
Chef Aline Kamakian, thank you so much for your time today and for your important efforts. We really appreciate it.
We thank you for watching, and remember,
Shut
stay
up, Tom Llama.
breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.
Bring back Lester. We want to bully him. There was apparently a police chase, but the channel that's covering it they can't rewind. See if the live police chase channel. No? Yeah, unfortunately, I can't. One of the stations that'll let you rewind, not cover it. Missed a box truck chase. Boo. It makes me a sad panda. Are we on the verge of another global pandemic? And is it going to be caused by people going on cruises? Is it going to be caused by stupid ass cruise ships? That is the question you should be asking yourself. What is hantavirus? Apparently already has killed 3 people.
Yeah, that's the doctor.
So it's been very tricky for Cape Verdean authorities. What they have to deal with is a public health event Of course, they have been thinking about the protection of the population here in Cabo Verde. And then, of course, they've been very careful to also give the needed medical assistance to the patients on board that have symptoms. So in the last 20 hours, they have been with a big medical team, 2 doctors, 1 nurse, and 1 lab specialist on the boat 3 times to assess and give necessary medical assistance on the boat. So that's the solution. And then we are then planning a medical evacuation. So from the boat, they will be transported in an ambulance that is waiting offshore, and then to the airport where they will be taken to
the
Netherlands.
The third person is in critical condition but is receiving medical attention. So the laboratory test results of both the second patient who died tested positive of hantavirus, just like the laboratory test of the third patient who's still alive but in critical condition. And the third patient is a British citizen, so is currently admitted in one of the private facilities in South Africa and receiving medical attention.
So off the coast of Cape Verde. I admittedly got a doctor from the New York Post here. Could this cruise ship outbreak lead to the next global pandemic?
Ship stranded, 149 people aboard, refused entry to port, no disembarkation plan. You can imagine how scary this is for the people on the ship.
A suspected hantavirus outbreak on the MV Hondius cruise ship has left 150 passengers stranded on board, sickening at least 7 and leaving 3 dead. But what exactly is this deadly Andes strain of hantavirus? And could it be the next pandemic? The Post spoke with infectious disease specialist Dr. Todd Ellerin to find out.
It starts off like any other virus. You can have fevers and GI symptoms, and on a cruise ship, you would think that that's norovirus. But in some of these cases, patients developed very rapid deterioration in their lungs, what we call respiratory distress syndrome, and some of them died very quickly. The Dutch couple, the husband and wife, cases 1 and 2, obviously they were married in close contact. Again, you don't know if both of them were exposed to the same type of rodent, secretions, or whether the husband gave it to the wife through close contact. That remains unclear.
Oh, it's
and
rat
then
shit.
The third death, the German patient apparently did
Great.
have close contact with one of the other cases on the ship. But other than that, we don't have a lot of details about close contact.
Yes, Hackman's wife died of hantavirus, and she didn't know she had it?
Most of it is in eastern China, where it's a different form. It's a hemorrhagic fever that's, when you can have bleeding and it can cause kidney failure. But in the Americas, it's a different form. It's called HPS, hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, where you can have sort of a cardiovascular collapse and a respiratory or pulmonary lung collapse. Unfortunately, in the Americas, it can be, one of the strains is the Andean strain, and that can have a mortality between 25 and 50%. So it's the most dangerous and the most mortal of all of the hantaviruses. Most of the hantavirus cannot be transmitted through human-to-human contact, but the Andean form can be. It's still rare, but there have been reported cases of human-to-human transmission.
Great.
In the Americas, it tends to be a respiratory virus that starts off with non-specific symptoms, fevers, gastrointestinal symptoms, but then very rapidly can affect the heart and lungs and cause a fatal type of pneumonia setup, or what we call ARDS, which stands for acute respiratory distress syndrome. Basically, the lungs can get filled up with fluid, and it's very severe. The most likely way of getting this, all forms of hantavirus, is through close contact with rodent droppings, urine, secretions, and it is not human-to-human transmission.
Don't drink
That's why
rat
the general
piss.
population does not have to be concerned about getting this. This is definitely not the next pandemic.
Oh, okay,
This
that's good.
hantavirus, while there can be rare human-to-human transmissions with this Andean strain, This is not COVID. This is not influenza. These are not the common respiratory viruses that are easily transmitted from person to person. And it's still not 100% confirmed that there was human-to-human transmission on the cruise, although it is definitely a possibility. If you think about it, when you look at all the Americas, there's only roughly about 30 cases a year. When you look at the last...
Oh, I thought he was going to say, when you look at all the Americas, there's only roughly 3 of them. You got your North America, your South America, your Central... Real Big Ben.
30 years, there's been under 1,000 cases. So this does remain very rare. Again, the general population, this is not a global issue as far as becoming a pandemic or a broader epidemic. Obviously, on the cruise ship right now, there's going to be a lot of anxiety. I mean, this is definitely
Stop going on cruise ships, assholes.
Very severe infectious disease. But
I can't imagine they're fun.
Human transmission is a possibility.
Why do people do it?
To be rare. Of course, what we want for the passengers, as quickly and as in a safe way possible, is to obviously be able to get off the cruise ship. But that needs to be worked out with the World Health Organization.
Alchemy, do you say bong rip? I guess we can do that. I've heard way too. I've done this for far too long and heard way too many horror stories about cruise fucking ships. Ain't no way I'm getting on no goddamn cruise ship. Oh yeah, Big Ben, we'd had like 30 to 50% of the results coming in Indiana. Hadn't had any results in just yet in Ohio when we stepped away from Kornacki, but we can check back in.
Trump said he'd try to take them out in primaries, and the pink means that the Trump side has won. And so you can see already now 2 victories for the Trump side, 2 incumbents taken out. This is Travis Holdman. He's not just an incumbent, he is a member of the Republican State Senate leadership in Indiana. And you can see NBC News has already declared he's going to lose. He's going to lose in a landslide. Also, right here, this goes from sort of the Kokomo area.
These are Republicans that voted against Trump's redistricting
Senator
plan.
James Buck, another one who voted against that redistricting, targeted by Trump. He is losing in a landslide. So that's 2 wins on the board already for the Trump
Joshua.
side. One incumbent
Pray to
targeted
me.
by the Trump team has survived tonight. Greg Good, he has been projected to win his primary.
We love you, Joshua.
But I can also tell you, these other districts that you see in sort of that brownish color right here, to varying degrees, the news is bad to extremely bad in all of them for the incumbents. For instance, up here outside Chicago, look at this. Dan Durnell is a Republican state senator who voted against Trump. We got a third of the vote in there. He is down by almost 50 points. So that's 2 wins so far, 2 incumbent state senators that the Trump side has been able to defeat. That number could grow significantly higher very soon, Gotti.
And what is Ohio looking like?
Yeah, let's see what Ohio looks like.
I think so much of this is just about setting the stage for the November general election. John Husted is the appointed incumbent senator there. Democrats are very much hoping that this is a seat that they can make competitive.
They can hoist him on his own petard.
The National Party, certainly the party establishment, wanted Sherrod Brown. He did technically have a primary challenger here. No surprise here. Brown's going to win that easily. So the stage is now set in Ohio for what will be a marquee Senate election this fall. Sherrod Brown, who previously had been in the Senate, lost his seat during that 2024 election when Trump won Ohio by double digits. Now Brown will attempt to win
he
back
didn't lose
the United States
to
Senate.
J.D.
Any
Vance.
chance, really, that Democrats have of controlling
the
the
other
U.S.
seat.
Senate next year, almost any chance, is going to require them to have Sherrod Brown win this seat in Ohio.
This is for the seat that J.D. Vance vacated.
And what is this going to do to the balance of power in Congress as you're seeing things shake out here?
Well, the other thing we're looking at here in Ohio tonight, some of these House primaries I could show you here on the Republican side. Sorry for all the colors here, but you could see this district here, the 9th. This is like some kind of ophthalmologist eye test or something. But the 9th district here, in fact, you're starting to see the results come in. These are Republicans who are in the
never seen a goddamn eye test look like that.
Marcy Kaptur is a Democratic congresswoman who's been in office since 1982. She's the longest-serving woman in congressional history and in the history of the House.
Motherfucker drops acid before he goes into the ophthalmologist.
There are very few opportunities on the map this year to take out Democratic incumbents. This is one in Congress that they're hoping for. Their primaries being settled tonight. So again, a lot of stuff we're seeing tonight in Ohio is about planting seeds for what will be November in the fall when this state is so closely watched.
NBC's Steve Kornacki, thank you so much. Now let's bring in.
You got it. Okay, let's go. What's that? Oh, I thought somebody was talking to me. Okay, so we're back over in Indiana here, congressional primaries here. I got to get back to. I'm sorry, folks. Anything come in while we were doing that?
No.
Okay. See, you didn't miss anything. So, first district. I'll just take you through a quick tour to see the numbers. There's the first district. Thurnell, just horrible for him. Rogers, she's putting up a fight, but she's going to have to do more in the 11th district. We've already seen Holdman go down in the 19th district. Buck has gone down in the 21st district. We still have just a scattering of votes in the 23rd. Spencer Deary, the incumbent there. Greg Good has survived, Republican incumbent, the only one so far to survive. He's done that in the 38th district. And the news was initially... There it is. Boy, what timing. Did you see the check mark, folks? I was just about to say the news has gotten real bad for him. It just got worse. Greg Walker, Republican incumbent state senator in Indiana, has been defeated for renomination. NBC News is projecting that State Representative Michelle Davis has won the primary in Indiana's 41st Senate District. Walker, one of those Republicans who voted against the Trump-backed bid to change the state's congressional map to try to draw Republicans more seats in this year's midterm elections. Again, Davis is state legislator. Walker actually had announced his retirement. Then this whole, at that point, Davis got in the race. And then when this whole redistricting battle started, Walker changed his mind, said, I want to fight. I got my energy back for this fight. But the voters here, the Republican voters, have decided they are going with Trump's side. They are going with Davis's side. And so now we can zoom out and we can show you.
She's definitely better looking than him.
7 incumbent Republicans. The
that was a low bar.
Their challengers tonight. 1, 2. He's put 3 wins on the board. He's lost here.
This is the primary.
We have 4 results now that are official, 4 races called by NBC. The Trump side has won 3 of them. I might add, it's won those 3 races.
I was curious. They told me she went to vote. I'm like, you didn't really have anything to vote on, did you?
We've been taking you through it. What's still to come in that district? I think you expect that lead is going to grow for her in that district. These are resounding verdicts here. Up here in the first district,
yeah,
thank you for the resub. Right now, could very well be 4 in the near future. Look at the situation. Dan Thurnell has got himself in there. Could that become 5 if Linda Rogers doesn't turn it around in the Elkhart County portion of the district? Again, remember, St. Joseph County here. This is just outside South Bend. This is Granger.
If there's even a Democratic challenger,
vote is in. She's competitive, but she's
never
losing
know.
here. What would she have to do? She'd have to do the opposite. She'd have to win by a comparable margin.
Indiana, it's a pretty red state outside of Indianapolis.
There. Look at the politics of Elkhart County. This is the Trump country part of the district, where where her home base is the more politically competitive part. She's losing her home base, the more politically competitive part. She's going to have to somehow overcome. She's going to have to somehow make up for it in the pro-Trump part of the district. Given everything you're seeing tonight, do you like her chances? But that's the situation for Linda Rogers. So that could end up being
Farmers
5.
Are getting fucked.
You see here the 23rd.
I don't know, like
district.
how
big
is farming?
I didn't expect that, to be honest. They've been faster before.
Indiana
Spencer
economy.
Deary, the incumbent here, Paula Copenhaver. These two did run against each other 4 years ago when this was an open seat. It was a crowded primary. It was 40-23. Deary over
farm country's a little further west.
Running with Trump's support this
Indiana's
evening.
more industrial.
We have literally 129
It might be,
votes
especially in the northern part of the
to say
state.
anything of note there. And anything new, again, I don't know how to illustrate this best except to say this district right here, the 6th district, or as I was calling it earlier in the night, the 13th district. I don't know why I was saying that. It's the 6th district. This is the other Republican state senator up tonight who voted against the redistricting plan, who for some reason Trump decided not to get involved, did not endorse his challenger. The early returns here, a very close race. This is primarily part of Lake County here, Chicago suburbs. It extends down to Newton County as well. but primarily you're just in that sort of extended Chicagoland area here. The governor, Mike Braun, did get involved here. This could end up, this is very close right now, but this could end up being another win for the
20 points
pro-Trump
separating
forces.
them.
Trump himself, as I say,
There's like
not
1% in though.
But it's possible.
I guess it is close if it's 79 to 50.
This state, yeah, in other words, Greg Good survives, a Republican state senator who voted against the redistricting plan. And you say, okay, well, the Trump side can only win 6. No, they can still win 7. They can win 7 if they win this one. So I say it's possible they get 7, and it's just not the 7 we were thinking of at the start of the night. That looms as a big possibility. We also had mentioned this race at the start of the night. Open state Senate primary. We put it up here because Trump did make an endorsement here.
This is kind of scary.
Jeff Ellington with the promise that
these
he's
local Republican parties are just continuing to purge themselves of anyone who
Trump and at the moment
goes against Trump.
In that congressional map fight last year. Ellington with the promise
and this
to go
comes
there,
as like
and
Marjorie Taylor Greene is
Trump
saying,
okay, I'm on board, I endorse you.
MAGA
Ellington,
is
you can see here,
dead.
kind of running away with it with about 3/4 of the vote counted right there. Do we have anything new in that 6th district?
Yeah, we have nothing new in Lake, but more from Newton. Where everything we're getting is election day vote there.
Okay, what does it look like?
We got Starkey up to 57%, Niemeyer at 43%.
This is what it's the entire vote?
It is the entire vote, but it is all election day at this point, and it's 985 votes total.
It's only election day vote?
Yes.
So like we didn't get a batch of absentee first.
We've gotten 3 batches of election day votes.
Okay, good. And again, this is the sourcing on this is different for sort of convoluted mechanical reasons here, but these are numbers that are coming from the state website as opposed to our own data provider. I'll spare you the long-winded explanation, other than to say that in the much smaller part of this district here, where I think you would expect Starkey to do his best, he's leading 57-43 with about 1,000 votes counted. In the much bigger part
I want the left to take over the Democratic Party.
It's part of the same county here where we see Dan Durnell, the Republican incumbent here, getting clobbered. That same county is also the lion's share of this district. And what Adam had told us a few minutes ago in Lake.
But we're not goddamn cultists. After death threats, ex-MAGA loyalist reveals Trump's shocking text messages to her. I don't know if this is all in this clip down here. Watch the clip. Oh, this is 30 minutes fucking long. It probably all is in the clip. Hold on, let me see. Let me go back to Kornacki and I'll find where that's at in the video. We'll get Marjorie Taylor Greene saying
7 districts where Trump made endorsements. They all breathe the same air in Indiana, meaning they've spent the last months consuming the same political war. So it almost stands to reason that a state senator who voted against this, even though there wasn't technically a Trump endorsement, the energy is still there on either side. And so it stands to reason he'd find himself in a
We got some new vote
where?
back in Senate 11.
Yep. What do we? Oh, is this from Elkhart?
No, more from St. Joseph, but another 1,500 votes.
And it went for Schmutzler, huh?
It did.
Wow.
The name like Schmutzlers.
95 means we think that's probably it.
I think so, yeah. He wins this batch about 61-38.
Yeah, there it is again, that same day. Big number there for the challenger. Again, when we put it up to 95, we're not sure that's all the vote that's going to come from there, but it might be. It's getting close. We're checking on a few things. This is basically what the picture is going to look like out of St. Joseph County. Again, half the district here, half the district here in terms of where the vote's going to come from. This was supposed to be the good part, the best part, the better part for Linda Rogers, the incumbent. She's going to end up losing this by double digits. She's going to lose her part of the district by double digits. That means she's going to have to win the much, much more pro-Trump part of this district by double digits if she's going to hold on to her seat. Do you think, based on what you're seeing in all these other districts, that she's going to do that? If you do, then she can survive. If not, then the Trump forces are going to put another win on the board in the very near future here. Again, Elkhart County. That's the portion of the district we have nothing from. This is what it looked like in the 2024 presidential election. I do have
So Marjorie Taylor Greene dropping bombs out here. This is about the text she received after telling Trump about death threats to her family.
I sent them to all these people. I got no response from Susie Wiles. None. And she's a mother and a grandmother and a woman. I got no response from James Blair because he only cares about making money on campaigns. I did hear from Kash Patel. He said on it, but I haven't heard from him since. I don't know what he's on. J.D. Vance was very nice to me, compassionate and kind, and reassured me that he would do everything we could to find out what's going on. And then I heard back from Donald Trump. And I've saved these text messages. I'd probably get put in jail if I released them publicly, but I saved them. Where Donald Trump proceeded to tell me that it was my fault and that I deserve it. If my son gets killed, I deserve it because I was a traitor to him. That is our president of the United States. That's the man that says MAGA is whatever he wants it to be.
Yeah, he's a gigantic piece of shit. We all knew it. That's why we were against him. That's why you were stupid to support him. You know, I knew he was like that before he ever ran for office. Called it.
When we started talking about releasing the Epstein files, I'm like, this is a no-brainer. President Trump will just roll them out on a big cart himself. Stacks and stacks and stacks of the Epstein files because obviously Bill Clinton is all in there. And Hillary Clinton. That's what I had been told all along, right? Well, it was the most shocking thing when I sat in a conference meeting and I learned that the president didn't want to release the Epstein files.
Because he's in them.
I was like, what? Yeah, come to find out, he was very much against it. So we kept on trying and kept on talking about it. And then the president told Mike Johnson, no, do not bring that resolution to the floor for a vote. He told the Rules Committee, and Johnson told the Rules Committee, no, you will not mark up any bill in the Rules Committee that will allow the Epstein files to be released. And the resistance built and built and built. He told Pam Bondi, don't release the Epstein files. He told everybody, don't release the Epstein files. So we persisted. Because that's what we promised. That's what we campaigned on. Transparency and accountability, especially to pedophiles. How is that complicated?
Because you elected a pedophile.
So it got to be such a gigantic amount of resistance coming from the president and the speaker and everyone, the DOJ. I said, fine, I'll do the unthinkable. I'll go over there and I'll sign my name on a discharge petition that all the Democrats are signing their name on. Talk about crossing the aisle. Me, a general in the MAGA army, crossing over to sign my name with a bunch of Democrats. Yeah, I did.
Like the one good
because
thing you
women
did.
Were raped when they were 16 and 14 years old. And he was a convicted pedophile, and we knew there were many with him. So I signed my name on the discharge petition. Oh, did I get my name on the naughty list then? Let me tell you. That became a real issue at the White House. Well, I'll never forget it. I was in my office in the Rayburn building, and I got a phone call from the president. And he was at the White House, and he wanted to talk to me about the discharge petition that I'd signed my name on. And he said, Marjorie, you're going to have to take your name off that discharge petition. We can't let, this is a hoax. We can't carry this. This is a hoax. It's a Democrat hoax. And we've got to just put this away and stop doing this. And he said, my friends are going to get hurt. He said his friends would get hurt if we released the Epstein files. He said, Marjorie, these are good people. These are people you know.
The pedophiles.
people in Palm Beach, they're going to get hurt by this. And I said, Mr. President, people have been hurt. These women have been hurt. I said, have you talked to them? I said, you should talk to them. You should have them in the Oval Office, Mr. President. You have everybody in the Oval Office. You have sports teams. You have world leaders. You have al-Qaeda terrorists that are now leading Syria. You have Mamdani. I mean, you have everybody in the Oval Office. Surely you can have these women who were raped as teenagers. Talk to them. I talk to them all the time. As a matter of fact, many of them voted for you. That's what I told them. They voted for you. Epstein victims voted for Donald Trump. And he wouldn't have anything to do with them. And he told me his friends would get hurt. And I said, I'm not taking my name off the discharge petition. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
She doesn't deserve a standing ovation for doing the very fucking basic.
Because this crosses party lines. It crosses, as a matter of fact, it crosses all the lines.
Basic common
when it comes
decency.
Down to victimizing some of the most innocent people in America, these were young girls that were teenagers that desperately wanted to be models one day. They wanted to be seen as beautiful. They wanted to be rich. They wanted to be famous. And of course, every teenager wants things like that. And they were victimized by Ghislaine Maxwell and others. And they were victimized by the richest, most powerful men, not only in our country, but in the world.
Yeah, like Trump.
And they were used by Jeffrey Epstein as sexual tools for his own satisfaction and his friends' satisfaction. To actually be asked by the President of the United States to back off and not help these women, that's when MAGA died. That's when the entire thing shattered for me.
Great, but 10 years too late. It was obvious to anyone with a brain 10, 15 years ago when he first started dabbling in politics and he started calling Fox and Friends all the time. Remember that? There was the pre-period when he just started sticking his toes into politics around 2010. Shelley, leftist. Welcome in. Let's check back in with the volcano. The butthole. This is Kilauea volcano. Currently erupting in Kilauea, Hawaii. Since we're on the topic of shitty people who used to be Congress, members of Congress, since we are on the topic of shitty people who used to be members of Congress, we got some fresh allegations coming at us about Eric Swalwell. Did they ever find him? He was missing last time we checked in.
And a dozen women have come forward to share details about their interactions with former East Bay Congressman Eric Swalwell.
Yeah, the women say they sent him messages on Snapchat and Instagram that escalated from flirtations to much more suggestive and even downright inappropriate.
ABC 7 Eyewitness News political reporter Monica Madden has been following the story for us. And Monica, you spoke
Oh, Monica, I thought she called her MAGA.
Come forward. What did she tell you?
Now, she wants to be clear that she is not accusing Swalwell of sexual misconduct, but her story is part of a larger reporting effort by CNN and other outlets to examine how the former congressman interacted with women he met through work and politics.
There was the Eric that I would staff, and most of the time business is normal. And then there was the Eric that I would talk to on Snapchat. and that was a different person completely.
A new CNN report has allegations from more than a dozen women who described interactions with former Congressman Eric Swalwell as uncomfortable.
Their stories suggest a pattern of Swalwell using social media to contact young women, including congressional staffers, and eventually escalating into flirting or inappropriate messaging.
One of the women included in CNN's reporting, Amanda Koski, also spoke with ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Koski is a former Capitol Hill staffer who says she met Swalwell while working in D.C. She says exchanging numbers for networking was normal, but that he later added her on Snapchat and Instagram, which she called
I'm a
strange.
little upset that it was apparently an open secret.
She ignored Swalwell's suggestion that they, quote, hang out, telling us, he made me
But
feel
there
uncomfortable.
were people that were like, I see the signs now, I put it together, but I didn't really know, and it wasn't my place to get involved in blah 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 relationships, and like I can get that, but like I really wish there was more policing of people for reasons like this. We had plenty of policing in the party for other reasons like being progressive.
And he's made many other women feel uncomfortable. And in retrospect, it does not look good. While not accusing him of wrongdoing, Koski says she wanted to describe conduct she believes fits into a broader pattern. Ali Samarco, who did accuse Swalwell of sexual misconduct, reportedly told CNN he once sent her a Snapchat photo of his genitals.
The conversation started out professionally. We were talking about how I could work on the Hill. He told me to send over my resume. From there, the messages shifted to much more personal, much more inappropriate, and crossing a line.
Last month, Swalwell dropped out of the race for California governor and resigned from Congress.
No, 90s was probably the
allegations of rape and
the
other
height of it.
accusations of sexual
90s,
misconduct.
early 2000s.
Swalwell's legal team has repeatedly denied all accusations and did not immediately respond to our request for comment.
Howard Stern was doing the Ass Man routine at the MTV Music Video Awards or Movie Award, whichever one it was, and that would have been like 94, 95. I think 95. 95 probably sounds right. That would have been the year that Private Parts came out. I would say that's peak shock jock. But then you've got like Sirius and XM came out, and Sirius signed Howard, and XM signed Opie and Anthony, and I was an Opie and Anthony fan, and that would have been, you know, through the 2000s. That's your height of your shock jock radio. Back to the Karnacki cam.
Through here and see
we
where the
should
vote
be getting some updates on
remains
Ohio
to come
here.
from. It's the first time I'm seeing. Idiot Steve. All right, it's 60. Yeah, it's just trying to see if there's any big patches here with nothing up. He is 93, 82. Okay, the one thing that we would say here is every one of these counties where we have vote, Shreve is leading in the vote count in all of them. Very evenly here. He is leading in all of them with nothing reported from 2 counties so far. So it's interesting. He's in a relatively close race.
I'm stepping away for
there
just
is
a
no
second
obvious
to
source
get
there where
a
Brown is
refill on my
well ahead in the county count. Keep an eye on that one. Yep. Obviously. And did we look at like this is the one I thought you were flagging here? Jim Baird in the 4th district. He's okay. So this is Jim Baird was endorsed by Trump. This is a state legislator who did get, I believe, the attorney general backed Haggard in this race. But Baird looks almost 2-1 lead there in the 4th district. Again, this is on the congressional side. Andre Carson, the Democrats, another one to kind of look at here in the 7th district. Okay, we've projected Andre Carson the winner. A Democrat first elected back, I think, in 2009 in a special election. He is able to win here fairly easily. There was a little bit of chatter about this one. Going back here to the state Senate situation, do we have any new vote that's come in anywhere?
We do not.
Okay, so the next things that we're looking for are just, I've set this up, but the L card, when we get an L card update, I think it's going to really clarify a picture that's already pretty well in focus. But what you're looking for when the L cart number comes in here is, does Rogers get? Is she leading it? Is she leading it big? She has to reverse a pretty bad showing for herself
Long
in her
ribs,
own
you
part of
say.
the district. Looking here in the 23rd district, we're just looking for more vote right here, obviously. But what I really want to see is clarity down here in Park County, or failing that, I want to see one of these other rural areas come in with its vote to see if it's lining up with Warren County. The only thing that's really meaningful that we have out of this part of the district, you see right here, nearly a 20-point lead for Copenhagen. I think there's a lot of, you might think the district is going to the rest of these counties outside of Tippecanoe are going to look like this. We have a scattering of vote down here that doesn't. So let's see either if we can clarify what it actually looks like in Park County, or if we see other counties where we get full, pretty complete results that look like Warren. I think we'll kind of know what's coming.
I told Curiouser that
but right now,
I popped out to see if she wanted to do Cinco at a Mexican restaurant. She was in the shower.
And again, this one
she's like, I ate ramen.
1, 2, 3 Republican incumbents lose in landslides, opposed by Donald Trump. A fourth right here, losing currently the count in a landslide. Just waiting, I think, looking here to see early vote, all from one county. Is there any, what am I trying to conjure here? Some scenario where the same day vote is that dramatically, crazily different that Durnell could reverse in nearly 50-point
He has not yet given us a single update on Vivek and
Trump's forces
Putsch.
Comfortably ahead.
And I thought
here.
that was going to be like the race to watch tonight.
Again, I've asked Adam just to kind of monitor. I'm sorry, this is the best I can
running
do
away
for you
with it
graphically, but this is the 6th Senate district in Indiana. The one Republican incumbent who voted against the redistricting, who Trump, for reasons not fully explained publicly, did not get involved against, even though the challenger has brought.
Ramaswamy has been declared the winner.
Updates from, or we have Benton County in the mix now.
I thought Putsch was coming on strong here at the end. I thought it might be more of a race.
Based on what we can source from these individual counties, is 51.5 for Niemeyer and 48.5 for Starkey, and that's with.
I'm sorry, Niemeyer 51.5.
Yep.
Starkey 48.5.
Yep.
Cumulative. What percent of the expected vote district-wide is in?
We don't have an expected vote because it hasn't come. It's not coming through our system, but it's about 4,500 votes total.
4,500 votes total. I think 1,500 were from Lake. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, and then Newton had what, 1,000?
Yes.
And you
apparently
said
it wasn't super close at all to Jones.
How did the Benton vote break?
The Benton vote 60-40 for Niemeyer.
Okay, so that's So again, this one is my sense looking at this with the kind of skeletal picture.
Serotonin. Who is this? This is Steve Kornacki on MSNBC. He's the
Trump endorsement, right? I mean, just again,
numbers guy.
Contrast Niemeyer being in a nail biter right here so far in this district with the other portion here, another portion of the same county.
He is covering state Senate races in Indiana.
There's down by 50. Okay, Trump endorsed in the race where the incumbent's down by 50. Trump didn't endorse, and the incumbent is in a neck and neck race right now.
A lot of state senators
look at those results right now and say there's an effect, a clear effect there of Trump not weighing in. That said, this is an incumbent who is still looking at numbers.
And voted against the redistricting plan, and Trump endorsed a lot of their opponents, and it's been a bloodbath.
I think speaks probably just to the broader
for the
in Indiana
state
politics,
senators that did not go with Trump.
Himself does not go out there and give
like
a signal.
7 of them are going to lose their seats.
Vote for Starkey in this race.
There are 8 of them that Trump went after, and 7 of them are going to lose their seats.
And understood the race in the same terms that Republicans clearly in these other districts did as well. So again, like we say, 7 incumbents were targeted by Trump. 1 of them is going to survive. 3 of them have lost. A 4th in awful position, a 5th in very, very, very bad position, and it could be 6 we don't have any clear sense of yet, and a 7th could end up being right there in this district. And again, it's one of those, I'd love to get some more.
So 7 were actually targeted by Trump.
We're watching this. Maybe there's some
and he's still going to end up with
that I've missed. I would love
7
to get
wins.
some reporting on why the. I'm sorry if somebody's done this and I haven't seen it. It's my ignorance, not anything else. But why Trump would not have gotten involved in this race. The governor did. Mike Braun did. Mike Braun endorsed Starkey in this race. There's some other Republican leaders who got behind Starkey as well in this race. So what was Trump's reason for not?
Because the pedophiles are racking up wins in Indiana. That's the crazy. Hitching your wagon to a pedophile is a good strategy in Indiana, apparently.
Does that move the needle from 51-5, 48-5 to something more definitive? Looking around here, it's hard to argue it wouldn't. So I'm very curious the backstory there. But the overall message, so much of what tonight is about is we're saying it's the start of May, and
it's gonna be May.
We're looking at a series of primaries this month where Trump is going after or trying to sort of put his thumb on the scale on the Republican side. We got one in Kentucky. The next one after this is going to be Louisiana. Bill Cassidy, the Republican incumbent senator there, facing a primary on Saturday night, May 16th. We'll be doing that. Trump has gotten involved there for the Congresswoman Julia Letlow in that race. Now, it may end up being a runoff. It may not be definitive on the 16th, but there's a test of Trump's clout. And if you're looking ahead to that race, and the question of
the Amy Acton Vivek race is going to be close.
Opposing him,
could we see a blue Ohio?
Clear signal is being sent in these primaries in Indiana.
It's been 25, 30 years, isn't it?
Tom Massey,
since there's been a Democratic governor.
Primary there. We have a very interesting race. We'll be covering that one, obviously, on the 26th. This is an interesting one.
There was a Democratic senator not that long ago, 6 years ago.
Runoff. There was an early
8 years ago
sense that Trump was going to get involved on behalf of Cornyn. He hasn't waded in at all. There was a new poll out that had the race within a couple points. Does Trump choose ultimately to get involved there? And again, I think just
Brown just lost in 2022, didn't he?
Suggests, given how close the polling is there
that
in Texas, that if Trump decided to kind of put his thumb on the scale there,
I thought Brown was going to pull it out, and I was wrong. He got trounced.
Would you think that would be decisive?
I got some new results for you, Steve.
Where?
23, Park County.
Oh, okay. This is, we said if we could get, and there it is. Well, okay, this is interesting. And again, do we know here same day, early? Because again, these both come in 2/3.
Yeah, let me take a look.
This is a little. Yeah,
Ohio went for Trump by like 22 points to Jones.
These are the
I don't call that
areas
purple.
here that are heavily pro-Trump, right? Warren County, we got 2/3 of the vote, and Copenhagen's winning it by almost 20 points. Again, this is what it looks
That's
like.
one of like the most deep red states.
This is what it looked like in 24.
It was purple 30 years ago.
Pretty similar, in fact, almost identical politically here. This is what it looked like in 2024, and we got about.
I remember when it was in play,
and it's a little closer. Okay, I think we've seen some of these other incumbents in areas like this doing worse than Deary is. But he is still, he's trailing solidly in Warren. He's trailing by a little bit here, but he's holding his own in Park County. Between the two of these, by the way, it's about a third of the district. About 13% of the vote's going to come out of Warren County, and about 18% of the vote's going to come here.
Sorry, I was wrong. It was 11.3.
Is going to come out of Tippecanoe County, which is sort of the outlier part of this district. Outside of that, the other one that kind of rivals Tippecanoe in size is right
I thought
here.
It was 22.
23% of the vote is going to come out of Fountain
I'm bad
County.
with numbers.
This one's going to be... this one is setting up when Fountain County comes in. Right, this is what Fountain County looked like in 2024. Talk about pro-Trump, right? Copenhagen is the county chair, the county Republican chair.
Bondermuggy, welcome in.
She's also an aide to the lieutenant governor in Indiana. So this is, if there is a sort of a political base for Copenhagen, this is it. It's a pretty big piece of real estate. So I think, look, if you're Copenhagen, this is what you want to see. This is a little, Deary's doing a little bit better here than I think you'd expect given the sort of demographics of it. If you're Copenhagen, this looms large. If Copenhagen gets a big number out of here, it's going to get very tough for Deary. And again, I think a lot for Deary is just going to rest on Tippecanoe County, where Purdue is, where Lafayette, West Lafayette are. Again, about a quarter of the vote, and just I keep showing you these overwhelmingly pro-Trump parts of the district. This is what Tippecanoe looks like, this part of the district. I don't think there is any part of any district that we've been showing you tonight, any component county that's as anti-Trump as this. It's a general election, but I think it gives you a sense of the political climate here. And I think demographically, again, we talked about it, more than half the adults, we got another, more than half the adults there with college degrees, which typically aligns with a little bit of skepticism toward Trump. 2/3 of the vote. Vermilion County here. Again, these are all sort of demographically and politically similar areas.
Album?
And again, you're seeing Deary do better here than these other Republican incumbents statewide have done in these areas. Enough, I think. Look, competitive. He's losing it, I should say, by fewer than 100 votes in Park. 2/3 of the vote in Vermilion. He's losing it by 133 votes, 8 points. Up here in Warren, 2/3 of the vote, he's losing it by a couple hundred. But cumulatively, that's what it looks like district-wide. Deary's in the game here. Deary's in the game, especially if you accept the view that this is going to be good for him, that Tippecanoe is going to be different than the rest of the district and good for him. Now, that may not be the case necessarily. Remember, we thought up here in St. Joseph County that was going to be good for Linda Rogers. It hasn't been. We thought that Hamilton was going to, be a little skeptical of Trump here. It wasn't tonight. Demographically, Tippecanoe is pretty similar to these places. Again, you're in the college town here. It's a little, West Lafayette. But I think a lot for Deary is, if Deary is getting the numbers that we're seeing, if Deary can do that in Fountain County, all right, if he can be something like this in Fountain County, the opportunity he gets a big number out of Tippecanoe that offsets this and gets him to victory, certainly there. So we're not looking with 1/3 of the vote here in the 23rd district. When we had 1/3 of the vote in here, and maybe even here, it was pretty clear cut what was happening. And for that matter, 1/3 of the vote is in here, and you see that's almost a 50-point race. More muddled here. It also was clear cut here, by the way, that Good was going to win. So this one is looking very interesting at 33%. And again, Fountain, extremely pro-Trump. Fountain and Tippecanoe probably produce about the same number of votes in a Republican primary. They're extremely different politically. Fountain went for Trump by more than 60 points in the presidential election. Tippecanoe went for Harris by 15. So it's a 75-point difference in terms of where those areas were in the 2024 presidential election. So, an interesting game I think we might play here kind of with the results, not game, but the way we might look at this. And we'll see Montgomery. It's small. To open this up, we don't have Montgomery. It's only a small portion of Montgomery. It's much smaller than the rest of this. You'd expect it to be pretty good for Copenhagen, too. Oh, this is big. What was the number? This is her area. Okay, we got most of the vote in Fountain County, where Copenhagen's the county chair. She wins that. She's leading that by 13 points. Ooh, this is getting, so what does that look like district-wide? 900 vote advantage for her, almost 900 district-wide. I believe she will pad that out just over 900 when we get Montgomery. It's much smaller in terms of it. And what's left? Just look at that. I'll leave it here because I think it's coming in here, right? I mean, we got 99% of the vote, and Schmutzler is up by 20 points.
Someone didn't like the Schmutzler hype.
Right? I mean, just see if we, I'm just going to I want you to see the moment. You get the, come on, folks. Don't leave me hanging. Is it coming, Adam?
It's coming.
There it is. There's the check.
All right. There's the check mark. NBC News has projected it in Indiana's 11th Senate District. Brian Schmutzler, a challenger backed by President Donald Trump, has defeated incumbent State Senator Linda Rogers. That is 4 incumbent members of the Indiana State Senate, incumbent Republican members, including a member of the Republican leadership, have now been defeated. And all of these 4 incumbents who have been defeated, per NBC News projection, have been defeated in landslides by 20 points, almost 20 points or more in each one of these races. Again, just to look at the margins, almost 20 points in the 41st.
Back. We should be rocking now.
Points, in the 41st, 30 points in the 21st, more than 20 in the 19th, and you just saw it up here, almost 20 points in the 11th district. And then there's this. We've just been waiting for some same-day vote here, but here's the Republican incumbent losing by almost 50 points. So really, folks, this, barring something totally, almost unfathomable, will be 5. 5 Republican incumbents targeted by Trump going down potentially in very lopsided defeats. 1 surviving down here in the 38th district around
I think
Terre
we got
Haute.
2 more to come.
Greg Good. And then there's the unknown. Now we got 55% of the vote here in the 23rd district. And so Paula Copenhaver, endorsed by Trump. Spencer Deary, remember, he was the aide to Mitch Daniels. Mitch Daniels was the president of Purdue, was the governor of Indiana for 2 terms, for a while there. Folks thought he was going to run for president.
Well, I definitely don't like him.
Daniels could have run against Trump in the 2016 primary, didn't. But and we got a little bit here to come in Montgomery. Now this is small in terms of the vote here, but politically, demographically, this is akin to what you're seeing elsewhere here. So this is going to pad. I assume when we get the report here, it is going to pad by a small margin, but it will pad this Copenhaver advantage here. It may be that when you get all said and done from these counties, and again, it's 2/3 of the vote, 82% of the vote, 2/3. There's still more to come. 2/3 in most of these, about 80% in one of the others still to come. All of the Montgomery portion still to come. So this is the Copenhaver lead she's going to pad the lead here, but probably be ahead by about 10 points if this goes sequentially, when you get the results from Tippecanoe. And we've said Tippecanoe is the outlier. In a lot of ways, it's the outlier of the entire map tonight. Okay, this is a college.
Yeah, there's
county.
one ponder monkey.
It's a giant.
I'm
state
just playing.
The Boilermakers. Okay.
A lot though. No.
Some other.
I'm pretty sure their legislature has a supermajority. That's one of the reasons why Trump got so mad at him.
Indiana 39, which is the other seat that Trump endorsed, but was not did not vote against redistricting.
Okay, right, yeah. This was the open seat. Trump made an endorsement here. And again, we told you this guy he endorsed, Jeff Ellington, said he wants to go to the state Senate. He wants to vote against the Republican leadership that was against Trump on redistricting. He got the Trump endorsement. NBC News projects that Jeff Ellington will win there. So it's not as significant, I think, in terms of the message as beating the incumbent, which we're seeing elsewhere. But this is another win for the Trump forces. So again, the outstanding pieces of real estate in Indiana, really, it's just 2 things right now. One is just waiting for some same-day vote here. That's really kind of it. And then it's this. It's what happens here in the 23rd district, and really, it's what happens in Tippecanoe County. That's, if Deary is going to be saved here tonight, Tippecanoe County is what's going to save him. And we're just trying to get a sense here of how many votes he would need to win Tippecanoe by. Remember, 82% of the vote, 34, almost 3,500 votes. Still more to come here. Okay, probably it's probably going to be about a little over 4,000 votes when all's said and done coming out of Fountain County. And there's probably, if the past is prologue here, probably about 4,000 votes are going to come out of Tippecanoe County. So it is, and again, it's just the outlier in every way here, demographically and politically.
Cute this morning in her Indiana Jones
hat.
hat.
Finish tallying up all the votes down here. Okay, I mean, it could come at any time in Tippecanoe. But if it were to work this way, where they finish tallying up all the votes here, Copenhaver's going to be ahead pretty significantly. Is Deary going to win Tippecanoe by a large enough margin to offset it?
So tired of hearing Deary and Tippecanoe. We got more news to cover. Right-wingers are all in arms. All up in arms. Oh, I'm sorry, it was a Stetson. Not an Indiana Jones hat, which is a pork pie? Rodeo week in Shasta. That's why she had on the Stetson. Clinically, welcome in. You looked cute in your Stetson then. I was way ahead of you. The right-wingers are all up in arms right now because apparently the judge in the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooters case apologized to him because they seem to be really overbearing for someone who honestly is not facing that serious a charge, but they're looking at it like, oh, he tried to assassinate the president. Well, are you going to admit that the president's a pedophile? That's kind of what it's coming down to here. I like it.
Developing this evening, a federal judge apologized to the man the accused White House Correspondents' Dinner shooter for his treatment in jail. Cole Allen's attorneys say he has been subjected to solitary confinement and denied basic requests inside the D.C. jail. Our Matt Gregory has been following this for us. So, Matt, now that the judge...
Let me translate for people who might be stupid. The judge is saying that he might have had his constitutional rights violated, and that's a problem.
Apologized. What happens from here?
Judge Zia Faruqi inside the courtroom wanted to know why Cole Allen was deprived of the normal privileges allowed for inmates. The comparison he made in his mind was simple. If January 6ers got standard treatment, why isn't Allen?
Cole Allen back in federal court in his orange jumpsuit listening while Judge Faruqi had questions for the Department of Corrections. Allen's attorneys provided evidence that during numerous psychiatric evaluations, Allen has never shown any signs of suicide risk or homicide risk and has no known enemies in the jail, but still the D.C. jail placed him in solitary confinement with 24-hour lights and 5-point restraints at times. Then the jail moved him to restricted confinement, but still denied him access to the Bible he requested, denied him access to an iPad to communicate with family, and denied requests to speak to his legal counsel at times. Tony Towns, the Department of Corrections, said Allen has been found a suicide risk, but produced no evidence. But he said he believed it was because of the political violence and high-profile nature of the attack that he was subjected to these conditions. When Judge Faruqi asked him if this is about precautions because of the nature of political violence, why were no January 6 rioters placed under these conditions? Towns didn't answer, but said they are working to accommodate Allen's requests. The judge apologized to Allen, then laid out his demands to the Department of Corrections. Essentially, they have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to explain when a final decision will be made on how Allen will be housed.
Now, at the same time, the judge had a demand if Allen isn't given the same treatment as the January 6ers. He wants a list of reasons why and to explain how they will keep Allen safe while not infringing on his rights. And if you're wondering why the judge made such a big deal about this, he pointed out that this is about our justice system. In this country, he said, you have the right to a fair trial. You also have the right to be presumed innocent as much as these allegations are serious. Lorenzo?
Okay, good update there. All right, Matt, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Matt. He was in court earlier today, I thought. Not seeing it. Is it Govin? Welcome in, friend. Throwing out a gift membership. To yourself, I love it. Who better to give a gift membership to? I appreciate you, friend. Man charged in Trump assassination plot indicted on new count in shooting a Secret Service agent. So they added a charge of assaulting a federal officer with a deadly weapon. A California man accused of trying to storm the White House Correspondents' Association dinner and attempting to kill President Donald Trump was indicted Tuesday on a new charge. He was initially charged in a complaint with attempting to assassinate the president and 2 additional firearms counts. Faces a maximum sentence of life in prison if convicted of the attempted assassination charge alone. His indictment by a federal grand jury in Washington, D.C. includes the same 3 counts, but also adds a charge of assaulting a federal officer with a deadly weapon. We still don't know that he shot him. He does point his gun at him, but we don't exactly know if he fired. A Secret Service officer was shot once in a bullet-resistant vest during the April 25th attack at the Washington Hilton. Allen was armed with guns and knives when he ran through a security checkpoint and pointed his weapon at the officer, who fired 5 times without hitting anybody. That's what we initially heard, was that it was friendly fire. In addition to the assault charge, authorities believe Allen fired the shot that struck the officer. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche indicated last week that investigators wanted to review more ballistics evidence before making that determination. It should be really easy to determine if he fired his gun. He had a shotgun. So they're saying it feels to me like there were 2 different guns that we heard, but we're hearing it from inside a ballroom. I could believe that the first shot was a shotgun. This is a live shot of the Kauai volcano in Hawaii. Looking like a butthole after it just had some Taco Bell. It's a beautiful sight. We're going to do a couple of crime stories. We'll check in with Kornacki another time. A couple of different verdicts came down today. Tanner Horner, the FedEx driver accused of abducting a 7-year-old Texas girl. This was the sentencing trial. So they put on evidence, and this was whether he was going to get life in prison or the death penalty.